So the reason this is part two of the story about my property, and let's just say my property and a school bus. I'm at a campsite, and someone just happened to have a school bus there. I think they want me to think of something, a couple things. Okay, so also about my property, the neighbor across the street, his sons, one of his son is was found guilty of murder. He was found guilty of murder. Both of his sons were involved in a double murder in Leelanau County about 15 years ago. So just a second here. What is this person doing? So, okay. So the two guys that committed the double murder, it was a drug deal gone bad, and they basically had a shootout and killed these two guys in Leelanau County, dumped the car in Leelanau County, and they were eventually caught. They were eventually caught. Second. So they grew up across the street from my property. In fact, there's a tree there. There's a tree on the property where these two guys had their tree fort. They had their tree fort there, and they also rode the bus when I was growing up. They rode our bus. They had an older sister too, who I knew really well. I knew them all really well. I never did anything with them though. We just had different friends, and they were like probably 3 or 4 years younger than me. They were in my sister's class. One of them was. So this double murder happens, and one of them's in jail. I don't know how long. The other one is out of jail. The father and the mother of the two guys were also got in trouble because they buried some of this marijuana or something. They buried some of the drugs that were involved in this deal gone bad. After the shooting had occurred, so it was kind of sketchy. The parents weren't involved in the shooting. They just kind of were freaking out after they discovered, and their sons told them or something that this had happened, and they're trying to conceal it all, and the parents got involved trying to help bury the drugs. This man is a very local character. He's a surveyor. We all know him really well. It's just one of those things in a small town that's just you never would imagine happening, and it does. So of course, in our town, what do you do? What do you the father never killed anybody, so it's his sons. So my property is right across the street from the father and where these kids grew up. So I think the father is basically just a fine person. There's nothing wrong about him. He just he's just a surveyor and does his job. Nothing makes him stand out as being weird or anything. He's married. So I think for a lot of people in the county, that might be some kind of a negative about my property, but I don't think it is at all. I've known him my whole life. I knew the family. You know, I knew the two boys before this all happened. So it's just one of those things that's kind of part of my property. One of the things that's kind of interesting is that ever since marijuana is now legal in Michigan, I've had several people show interest in my property as a place to grow the marijuana, and the reason why I think they're interested, one of the reasons why, is because it's right across the street from where this double murder. Now, it didn't occur there. It occurred like 10 miles away. But since they grew up on my property, just, you know, rooting around as kids, going over on my property, hanging out, exploring, there's people that think that my property is valuable for growing marijuana on it, because it kind of carries an essence of that double murder involving the sale of marijuana. So that's the story. Again, I don't think it affects my property, the price of my property, because I think the people that would buy my property are probably going to be someone who's from the city and they're used to hearing about crime, and it doesn't scare them to deal with, you know, a neighbor who is basically innocent, other than that he helped, you know, bury marijuana to try to save his son's life, basically from being, like, you know, even though they got caught anyways. So he didn't, you know, the father didn't have anything to do with the killing. He was there after the fact. You can imagine how terrible that must have been for them. So that's the story. Another one of those crazy stories that happened. And another thing about the story that's interesting is that I was called to be one of the jury members. So since it was such a high profile Leelanau County trial, they had a pretty large jury pool selected, so they could interview all these different jury members to see which ones were the best. And I was I was the only youthful person in the entire room taking this survey. So go figure. Was I the only one that registered to vote? Was I the only one that took it serious to show up? I don't know, but I was the only one, and I think that says something about me, and, you know, my relationship to the community. So that's the story, and thought I'd share that one.